Welcome to my channel, everyone. My name is Mark, and I'm an art professor and an artist who uses fountain pens to make art. And in this video, we'll talk about these 3 light-fast and waterproof inks made by DeAtramentis: Document Yellow, Document Red, and Document Cyan, and how they can be used to make an endless array of custom colors. I'll give you some quick advice on how best to do it, and show you a few ways to take advantage of your custom color mixtures. Let's get started. One of the great things about using fountain pens is the dazzling variety of inks which can be used in them, which not only come in every possible color, but also with different properties, such as transparency, color complexity, etc. The problem for the artist, however, is that many of these inks are neither waterproof nor light-fast. So, while you might be able to get just that perfect color of ink, it might not be usable to make professional quality art. That is to say, art intended for sale or display. Those two considerations severely limit the range of inks available, with just a few brands such as DeAtramentis and Rocher and Klingner producing light-fast, waterproof inks in a wide range of colors. But what to do if you can't find just the right color of ink for your project? Well, you can do what artists have done for centuries: mix them yourself. And since a huge range of color can be mixed just out of 3 primaries, I bought these 3 inks from DeAtramentis for this purpose. Can I mix up every possible color? No. Since cyan is a greenish blue, I will not be able to create vibrant purples. For that, I'll need a blue that's closer to primary, which DeAtramentis also sells. Nevertheless, these 3 colors will give us an endless variety of interesting color mixes, and here are just a few I mixed up. This Moonman C4 has a dark bluish gray in it, approximating Payne's gray. This Asvine V800 has a sepia. This Asvine V200 has a color similar to burnt umber. This Asvine V126 has an olive green. And this Asvine V800, yes, I have a second one, is filled with sanguine, a color that's very close to red oxide. Mixing colors out of primaries is a fairly straightforward process, which most artists are perfectly familiar with. But let me give you some practical tips which will save you time, ink, and aggravation. I recommend mixing your ink on a white palette with some deep wells, which will allow you to better see the ink colors. Have a test paper next to you for that purpose as well, and a watercolor brush. For best control while mixing, I recommend using a blunt-tipped syringe. To clean the syringe, have 2 cups, one filled with water and another one that's empty. And then, for storing your ink mixtures, I recommend these plastic lab vials. They can be labeled with the color mixture and the exact proportions used to make it. As for the pens used in this process, the first consideration is if the pen can be used with pigmented waterproof ink. There's a lot of panic-driven information on waterproof inks, with many manufacturers advising you not to put them in your pens. As an artist with lots of experience with waterproof inks, I'm here to tell you this anxiety is completely overblown. Yes, waterproof ink can clog the works if left in the pen for too long. But in the right pen, clogging is not something you should be afraid of. There are 2 things that make a pen a good candidate. First is ease of cleaning. If you can easily pull out the nib and feed in a pen and give them a good soaking, then the pen is a good candidate. Second, if the pen has a built-in filling system and can be accessed either from the back by unscrewing the filling mechanism or from the front by unscrewing the section. This will allow you to fully clean the pen body if you have dried up ink inside it. If your pens fit those 2 criteria, you have nothing to fear from an occasional clog. Take it from this scatterbrained artist who regularly lets his pens sit for months on end without cleaning them. Some pens with built-in filling systems with sections that do not unscrew, such as this TWSBI Eco, require filling from bottles with adequate ink levels. For this purpose, I recommend a device called an ink miser, which will allow you to get a decent fill even with smaller ink quantities. Otherwise, you'll have to mix more ink than you'd like only to fill up the pen. Okay, let's get started on mixing up some colors. The most important thing to keep in mind is that different pigments have different tinting strengths, and sometimes it's vastly different. In this case, the cyan blue, which is likely a phthalo pigment, is far and away stronger than the other 2 colors. The red here, likely quinacridone, is stronger than the yellow, which might possibly be diarylide yellow. By the way, fountain pen ink manufacturers, for some reason, do not disclose their pigments and dyes, perhaps because they consider them industrial secrets. This practice needs to stop. Artists need to know what's in their inks, and just claiming that a pigment is light-fast is not enough. But since it's unlikely that any ink manufacturer watches my videos, I know this rant is going to fall on deaf ears. So, on to the demonstration. Since the cyan blue is so much stronger than the other two pigments, I recommend adding it very sparingly, lest it completely overwhelm your mixtures. For darker colors, such as browns, I recommend starting with a dark neutral, as dark black and neutral as you can go with these three pigments. So I would start by putting down your red. Let's start off with a milliliter. Then let's clean off our syringe. And then we're going to add just a few drops of blue, again, because our cyan is so much stronger. So I think for this much red, we're going to add 1, 2, 3. This might be too much, but let's add... Okay, I think maybe 3 drops is going to be enough. By the way, in this case, I'm going to put the blue back into the bottle. I don't really recommend that. In fact, I recommend having 3 blunt tip syringes, one for each one of the inks. Because the blue is so much stronger, I don't mind a little bit of contamination. But definitely don't do that for your red, and definitely don't do that in your yellow pigment. Right, try to draw a little bit of ink at a time, and don't put it back into the bottle. Okay. So let's see how we did. Ideally, what we want is a very, very dark, kind of muddy purple. Since the cyan has so much blue in it, so much green in it already, it's going to muddy any purple color I'm going to attempt to mix up. Okay, so this is still a little bit on the purple side. We're going to add a few more drops. I should have put one more drop in. Okay, just in case, let's add 2. Okay, so what we're going for is a dark purple color. Okay, maybe one more little drop. Oh, I added 2. Okay, should be enough. Okay, and then we're going to take out any purple that we have in this mixture by adding a little bit of yellow. When switching from blue to yellow, really, really clean off your syringe well. We definitely don't want any contamination between these inks. Let's clean off the outside. Okay, so we're going to draw a little bit of yellow. We need just a drop or 2 of yellow. Yellow is going to be the weakest pigment of the 3. It's going to have the least effect on the color. Alright, so this is going to be about as neutral as we can go. And a good test would be to dilute the color a little bit and just see what range we get. Okay, fairly neutral. This is, by the way, a nice color. So it could be a substitute for Noodler's Lexington Gray or some other permanent gray pigment. But now we can take this neutral and start mixing browns out of it. So let's clean up the syringe. Not that we have to do that. The yellow is a very weak pigment. So we're going to take that and start mixing our warmer colors into it, our yellow and our red. A few drops of red, let's say 4 drops. And a few drops of yellow are going to get that sepia color we were looking at. Let's give it a shot. So that's going to give us a rich, warm brown, hopefully. Okay, there is our sepia. And then if I want to go warmer, I can keep adding color. A little more yellow. So what we're doing is adding more and more orange. Okay, so now we're doing something that's approximating burnt umber, right? Nice rich burnt umber, right? Now, for lighter colors, I recommend starting the opposite way, starting with your lighter mix. So for example, if I want to mix up my red chalk, my sanguine color, I'm going to start off by mixing probably about equal parts red and yellow, which, because the red is stronger, is going to give us a reddish-orange mixture. These two pigments, because they have different tinting strengths, aren't going to meet exactly in the middle. So you'll see that equal parts is going to lean more red than orange. Okay, so we have this kind of reddish-orange, and then I have to be careful. I'm going to add a little bit of blue. However, if I add even a little bit too much blue, it's going to throw off my mix, and I'm going to get something that is even green. Okay, so we're going to add this much blue to it. This is less than half a drop. Okay, so the blue on the opposite side of the color wheel, it mutes the color. So here is my red chalk. If it's too strong, it might be too strong. Let's add a little tiny bit more blue. Again, I have to be really careful. Okay, the blue has the effect of softening the color, muting it, making it look a little bit more like an earth tone. This sanguine color is perfect for creating work that's inspired by the red chalk drawings of the Renaissance masters. And in some ways, the sharpness of the ink strokes are more reminiscent of the sharp, precise marks made by authentic red chalk, rather than the synthetic products available to us today. The fact that this ink is waterproof allows me to layer the color and create darker values. So even if the ink color is on the lighter side, greater contrast can still be achieved. By the way, Diamine makes a similar color of waterproof ink, which they call red ochre. I'll have to try it at some point and report back, but for now, this mixed color perfectly satisfies my needs. Another wonderful way of working is to put this ink in a pen fitted with a Fude nib. In this drawing, I'm doing a copy of a drawing in red chalk by the 18th century French painter Fragonard. The Fude nib does a fantastic job recreating the various strokes made by red chalk, and again, because it can be layered, it allows me to build up the contrast gradually. One trick to get a touch of additional contrast is to mix up a slightly darker version of the color and then dip the pen in it whenever you want additional darks. You can also, if you want to go lighter, dip your pen in water, which dilutes the ink in the feed and allows you to put down very, very light values. Another idea is to use multiple colors together in a single drawing. Here I'm using two brown inks I mixed up, the dark sepia and the burnt umber, then the dark gray, which approximates pain gray, and the olive green to do this little landscape drawing. Diluting the ink by dipping the pen in water allows me to get a variety of different tones of ink and makes it easier to get a strong sense of atmospheric perspective. While this type of work can be done with store-bought inks, this method allows you to perfectly calibrate your palette of colors to work together, and all of those colors will be waterproof and light fast. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe and enjoy my fountain pen reviews, drawing instruction, and other art-related nonsense. And of course, please consider becoming a channel member, which gives you access to a large library of tutorials and 2 new classes every single month. Thanks so much for watching, and see you back in my messy studio very soon. Bye for now.